So, one of the other questions that I had was in relation to conscience voting. So, like, for example, Centre Alliance, I've always really liked their approach and the fact that they, I don't think have ever voted differently. They've always, eventually come to the same conclusion. I think when I spoke to Rebecca Sharkey, she explained it, that the process of them coming together and going through a policy pros and cons would often mean that they collectively came to the same decision. However, they were empowered to be able to vote by their conscience, which I feel is a really important part of the future. Could you talk to me a little bit about what the New Liberals think around conscience voting for their representatives?
Okay, so that Charter of Core Values that we've spoken about, that's for obvious reasons that we've also spoken about, is a non-negotiable thing. If you want to join the party, if you want to be a candidate, you have to subscribe to those Charter of Core Values. But within that Charter of Core Values, each person is fully entitled to put forward their own views as to how you arrive at that. So if we all agree that there shouldn't be executive detention without due process of law, where people get locked away for 10 and 15 years at a time when they've committed no crime, they're just asylum seekers or whatever, and we want to fix that. Now, there's going to be a variety of views within the party on how best to fix that. And those views will always be respected, and those views will be allowed to be publicly made. If you and I are in the party and we're both members of Parliament and we both agree that we have to get rid of this insidious thing, you're entitled to have your view as the best way. I'm entitled to have my view. We respect one another's views. We are free to speak to anyone we like, including the media, about our respective ways of approaching that. And then at the end of the day, probably, as you say, with Centre Alliance, through a process of discussion and debate, we'll come to a solution. If there's parts that are still, where you and I are still not in agreement, then we put it to the vote. And if you get the vote, then we'll go with your system. If I get the vote, we go with my system. We think that's a really important distinction to make between the principles and the objects and the values of the party, where there will be uniformity. There has to be, otherwise we can't exist together. And the ways of achieving those, which is a different thing where we're free to go. But beyond that, there's also certain types of matters, like gay marriage is a classic thing, where they're personal. And in that case, there would be, on the floor of the House, a freedom to vote how you wished, or abortion, or one of those very personalised things that you just... So in other words, if we're talking about mandatory detention and getting rid of that, and we have some discussion and we don't come to a full agreement, we have a vote, that's the position of the party, then we will all agree to support that and we will vote accordingly. But on those big conscience issues, I think we would follow the best of the historical precedent and let people vote according to their conscience on that.
That's quite refreshing, because for me, one of the inherent blockages in democracy is the fact that Australians are offered the opportunity once every 4 years or so at a federal level to have a say, but they're not really having a say. They're choosing a bloc, a big chunky party that has lots of, largely, some things alike. So this is the best of the evils. Whereas to be able to represent your community. So for example, and I was going to use the plebiscite for gay marriage as an example, because I believe in those instances, it's ideal for you to be able to go to your community, ask the community, where do you feel on this position, and thus be able to represent that back into Parliament. I feel like that is the nature of democracy. However, as opposed to, and as I discussed with Dahi from Flux, I actually don't think most people want to vote on every minute detail. They want to vote in for a party that they can trust to just get on and research, understand and do it, and they just need to trust you. But on certain matters, as you said, I feel that it is important to empower representatives to be able to do their job and represent their people. And so it is comforting for me to hear that would be enabled with the new